Elden Ring took off in a way not many expected, including FromSoftware, the developers behind the game. It's been a long and twisted road to finally get here, and this video is about how that journey for FromSoftware began. This is part 2 of a series celebrating Elden Ring, where we look at the designer behind it all, what it took to get to Elden Ring, what mistakes were made along the way, and what the future looks like for FromSoftware. If you want to join me on this series, please remember to like and subscribe so you'll know when the next video is released. FromSoftware began by developing productivity software in 1986. 8 years later, they did what all gamers do, ditched productivity and began game development, changing their name to FromSoftware. Their first release was King's Field for the PlayStation 1. King's Field would have 2 sequels before FromSoftware released follow-ups Echo Knight and Shadow Tower. But despite the number of releases, FromSoftware struggled to make a name for itself. The King's Field series was reviewed as complicated and hard to navigate with unconventional structure. Sound familiar? The King's Field series and its spin-offs ended up a commercial success in the long run through word of mouth, but it was a slow, arduous climb, and it came from a tiny audience. FromSoftware could not break into the mainstream and reap the security of doing so, at least not with King's Field. Armored Core is a third-person mech shooting game. FromSoftware released Armored Core in 1997. After the King's Field trilogy, they could accomplish what they needed with Armored Core. It broke into the mainstream in a big way, a series that not only demonstrated the talent of FromSoftware, but kept the lights on for years to come. Armored Core would have 13 main games and many spin-offs, generating a sizable, passionate fanbase. Now, the Armored Core series were very good games, very fun games, and deserved the success it garnered. But even from watching the few clips in this video, you know exactly what this game is. From a glance at the cover art, you've played some variation of this game before. And it is a very good one of those games, definitely. But it is one of those games. FromSoftware didn't want to be known for one of those, but rather one of theirs. This is evidenced by the games that they continue to develop alongside their long-running Armored Core series. Games like the aforementioned Echo Knight and Shadow Towers, and its sequels. Games like Eternal Ring. They kept returning to this idea, a game with deliberate combat and lore shrouded in mystery. And these games did find some level of success, at least enough to keep trying. But it was always from a small niche audience and never as successful as their Armored Core series. Never the success they needed. These games were constantly reviewed as overly complex and directionless. These attempts, these games, this vision they had would always land on the fringes of gaming. Until the star of our previous video, Hideotaka Miyazaki. After sliding his resume that just said, "I like Eco," Miyazaki joined FromSoftware in 2004 and worked on the Armored Core series. He spent 4 years working on Armored Core, reaching creative director, until an opportunity opened up. FromSoftware continued to chisel away at this RPG idea that never found the success they wanted. By the way, can we just applaud FromSoftware for their continued attempts? These guys just didn't give up. Can you imagine a company like EA or Activision doing something like this? Continuing to develop this idea that barely made money while they had a thriving franchise? Activision would have dropped the RPG like a searing potato to make room for their Armored Core Toys to Life series, and spending their time thinking up excuses for why these toys won't work with next year's version of Armored Core. Anyway, FromSoftware's latest attempt was called Demon Souls. Demon Souls was to be a spiritual successor to FromSoftware's first title, King's Field, but it was already considered a failure internally, and this was attributed to the team lacking a coherent vision. Miyazaki stated later that he wanted to work on Demon Souls because it was already considered a failure, so it didn't matter if what he did failed too. Pessimism so deep it's a positive. As you can imagine, higher-ups had hoped Miyazaki would continue to work on their successful franchise instead, but Miyazaki's hard work was rewarded, and he was able to take on the challenge of directing Demon Souls. Miyazaki stated that with Demon Souls, he wanted to take gaming back to its basics, creating a challenging gameplay-based experience. This was during the height of the Wii, where many in the industry believed the best design for a successful game was to make it as broadly accessible as possible. A big part of Miyazaki's strategy was the Souls system, a system the team went back and forth on before deciding upon players losing their souls on death. According to Miyazaki, they agreed on this because not losing souls would rob players of any sense of accomplishment. However, Miyazaki chose to keep the system and the intended difficulty close to his chest. He felt that if Sony, the publishers, learned of the system and the game's intended difficulty, they would require to be made easier, more accessible. It was essential to Miyazaki that players felt a sense of triumph and accomplishment, and feelings of triumph and accomplishment are only earned. In 2009, amongst the broken TVs from flying Wii remotes, Demon Souls was released in Japan. It was well received by critics, with many praising its straightforward, brutal approach to game design, though it didn't help the broken TV issue. But sales was slow, an all too familiar story for FromSoftware and their RPG vision, leaving many at FromSoftware fearful of its Western release. They would have to wait another year to see how the West would react. Fortunately, news from the East was reaching the West during that year about this challenging, obscure RPG. Demon's Souls sold out through its initial shipment upon its Western debut, selling 150,000 copies in its first month. Atlus, the Western publisher, stated later that they had hoped for 75,000 copies sold. Demon's Souls would double their initial estimate. Maybe it was due to the times, of gamers not feeling challenged by the majority of games available. Or perhaps it was the technology, with the unique online functions of Demon's Souls setting itself apart from other co-op titles. Maybe it was Miyazaki's insistence on having the game create that sense of accomplishment, that feeling of triumph, so insistent that he hid details about the game from their publisher. Maybe it was all these things. Maybe the stars just aligned. But finally, FromSoftware showed the gaming world the potential of their RPG vision. They found real international success, not from making another one of those games, but by making one of theirs. Demon's Souls was a significant turning point for FromSoftware and finally granted them the freedom to focus on their vision. While the success and sales of their new IP were undeniable, Demon's Souls would only be the beginning. Join me next time where we'll look at how FromSoftware fine-tunes their vision through the Dark Souls era and the impact their games left on gaming as a whole before reaching Elden Ring. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe so you'll know when the next one is released. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
How it's supposed to feel.